And it's a small group. So, Marcel, if you want any one on one coaching as you're going through the quiz, I'm more than happy to do that. I'm here. So, just let me know. Yeah, what's going on? Yeah, I'm at work right now. Um, yep, I'll talk to you later.
he wants to pay for somebody else's.
Wonderful. Does he need help with that?
Because he says, well, you can read it.
Tell him he has to sign up for the 60-hour program and use the coupon code sponsor and pay the $400 because that's the price for onboarding. So we don't really have a 30-hour.
But you tell him.
Okay.
It'll be faster if you do that.
Yeah.
And then if he answers instantly, then you can answer him right back.
All right, we're going to start doing the exam review on the YouTube channel. Jewel, I think you should just attempt the exam on your own. It's going to be a challenging exam. Not all the topics, not all the questions we covered in the training. So it's going to be indicative of what taking the actual NABCEP exam is like. And what we're going to do is have you take the... Sorry, hold on. I need a cough. Let me mute my mic. I'm going to have you take the practice exam on your own, and then we'll review it. And once you take it again, you have to pass this exam in order to get your completion certificate. So the first attempt is doing it just raw, and then we'll review the answers. Should be able to pass it that way on your second attempt. So okay, I'm gonna mute myself in Discord because we're gonna go to the live stream. I'm gonna type that in. And Marcel and Ivan, we're gonna get going on this quiz review right now. Let me pull it up. Okay, so we actually haven't reviewed the quiz from Friday. Hope y'all had a good weekend. I've enjoyed the time off a little bit. Let's see, day 5. That's what we want. And let me get the Discord pulled up so if someone has a question, I know what to... And let me make sure my recording's going. Here we go. All right, start recording. Okay, so we are reviewing the quiz from day 5 from Friday, and then we are going to go right into the NABCEP PV Associate exam review. So here's a question. What do you need to enter the top of an outdoor rated box? And this is a bit of a trick question. Most of the audience was thinking correctly but got the answer wrong. And the point is you should avoid entering the top of an electrical box if you can. But there are electrical boxes where you do enter the top from. Utilities do this all the time with overhead electrical services where the power lines come in from the top of the rooftop, and then there's a... Boy, my mouse is not working today. Let me see if I can fix that. And then there's the power lines come in and they go down a pole and they land in the top of the electric meter base. So, boy, that's awful. What is going on with my mouse? I need to get a new one. And they go into the top of the electrical meter base. So, what we're talking about is this connection point right here. So the utilities do allow it. It's not that it's... If you have the option to go down, around, and connect from underneath, that is the more waterproof, rain-tight option. But it's not that you can never enter the top of the electrical box. You can. A conduit coupling is actually the term for the piece that connects two conduits together. The piece in the middle is called a coupling. The end piece that goes into a box is called a connector rather than a coupling. So it's not a conduit coupling, and it actually wouldn't be just a conduit connector either. there's conduit connectors, and then there's rain tight conduit connectors. So we're getting real close with these rain tight fittings. In fact, in class we discussed a project where the site plan specified EMT conduit, but it did not specify rain tight fittings, and rain tight fittings needed to be used because they exist. So that's kind of a weird thing about EMT conduit, is there's a rain tight fitting that you can't always find at the hardware store, but is code compliant for outdoor use. So the real answer is, these rain tight fittings is what you would use on the outside or the bottom side of the box. Is you would go in with rain tight fittings, but there's a special component called a Meyers Hub. Let's go ahead and pull that up online. So there's a special component called a Meyers Hub that it just fits right into the top of the box, and it has more metal, more robust of a clamp. So these Meyers Hubs are what's necessary for when going into the top of a box. And in fact, I've had an inspector say, not only is that Meyers Hub for use when going through the top of the box, but anywhere along the top of the box, the side of the box, but up top, anywhere where water can get into the box and then drip down inside, you need to use a Meyers Hub. Otherwise, you would use a rain tight fitting anywhere else on that box. So entering the top of an outdoor rated box, you need to use a Meyers Hub. Next question. This one has bit me over the years as well. Which should be used on a roof for cutting? And so we had a commercial project, and because we did not buy the slip sheet add-on that went with the racking system, instead we had to cut a whole bunch of rubber squares out of rubber roofing material. And so down on the ground, we had a cutting station where we were just slicing this material with a utility knife. And then we started making them on the rooftop. And even though we had a setup for slicing these things with a knife, we had material and cardboard underneath it. One of our workers, and he was not the smartest worker, moved where he was working. And so instead of working on the workstation, he took his piece of cardboard board elsewhere and started working over there. And he's slashing with his utility knife, but right underneath this cardboard is the roof surface. So he's taking his knife and he's jabbing it to do this slicing motion, and it's going into the roof and cutting into the roof. We had to seal the roof in that case, and he got sent home from the job. So the point is that sharp knife blade up on a rooftop is a hazard, and you could drop your tool and it could slice through the rooftop. You can make a construction error and it could slice through the rooftop, or you could have an accident and that knife again could slice through the new rooftop. So professionals to cut things up on the rooftop are going to use scissors, which are better protected than a knife blade for cutting. So you use scissors on a rooftop rather than a utility knife. Conduit bender is a different tool for bending conduit. You use it a lot for residential. For commercial, you might be using pre-bent conduit or machine bent conduit. So no cutting should be done on the rooftop. That's a really good work process. There's nothing wrong with it, but maybe to open up a pallet, to bust open the pallet up on the rooftop, it's very tempting to pull out those utility knives and slash the box. And I'm not saying that that's not what's being done, but if you have tons of cutting, if you're cutting material on a rooftop for whatever reason, you should not be using utility knives to make those cuts. You should be using scissors. Now that kind of question is not necessarily going to show up on a NABCEP exam, but it's useful to know. So, you notice a hole in your roof. What should you do? You should notify your crew leader or foreman immediately. We had a job where our supervisor for the contractor was not on site full time, and so we noticed a hole in the rooftop, and I give him a call and don't get him, and I leave a message. He shows up by noon to 1, and by that point, he looks at the hole in the roof and says it's a problem, and we get the roofer scheduled for the next day. Well, about an hour later, a giant thunderstorm breaks open from the heavens, and all of a sudden we got water filling up this roof and going into the roof of the building. Holes put in the rooftop during construction may or may not be your fault, but they should not be left unattended to. You should have a game plan when you're working on a rooftop to say, well, what happens if we gash the roof by accident? How are we going to fix it, even if it's a temporary fix? Because if you have a hole in the roof, you got a hole in the roof. If you have sealant on hand to seal up that hole, that's better than just leaving it unattended to. So it may not be your role and responsibility to manage that, but at the very least, as a worker, you need to be passing that information up the chain of command to say, hey, there's a hole in this roof right here. We need to fix it. Again, might not be your problem, might not be your fault, but you're the worker on site, and if you can't manage somebody else's hole in the roof as part of a solar project, then you're not prepared to manage your own hole in the roof. The next question: how might you prevent PVC roof from peeling apart during a concrete ballast installation? And so we did a install on top of a brand new coating, white. It was a black roof, and they had this kind of white spray-on coating covering the whole roof. And about halfway into the project, it started peeling apart. And at first, we were really concerned that it was our fault, that the rooftop was peeling apart. We had a couple of these issues with these roof leaks, and the water had gotten into the building. And so we said, well, is this, how much of this is our fault and how much of it is the roof surface being weak? And we were actually pretty fortunate in this job because we were able to find a different section of the building where the rooftop, the same roof system, was peeling apart that we hadn't even been part of. Fortunately, that got the project kind of back on our end of it, saying the coating wasn't installed correctly. This PVC roof stuff is very thin, and if they get water underneath it while they're installing it, it doesn't stick. And if you're walking on that roof and it's not stuck to the roof, and you're a big heavy construction worker carrying around a bunch of concrete, that PVC coating, if it's thin enough, if there's something wrong with its installation, it can just flake off. So what do you do about that? And there's a few solutions. One of them is install a permanent or temporary walkway. If you don't have a permanent walkway down there, it still might not be a bad idea to put one down. You might be trolleying some concrete blocks across the rooftop, on a dolly. Well, those wheels in that dolly are now, the heavy points. So, laying down rubber roofing material as a walkway, of course, it can blow around. Laying down cardboard, that stuff could blow away, but maybe there's more permanent, rugged solutions that you can put down on a roofing system to prevent it from wearing. And particularly on a commercial roof, the one long axis of a rectangle, the long side rather than the short side, having a walkway with some durable roofing material from one edge of the roof back is quite valuable. And if you get on a commercial rooftop and none of that stuff is there, you need to be particularly aware of how transporting concrete on that roof might wear and tear it down. It might be that you can't muscle man, with a whole bunch of concrete blocks or a whole wagon of concrete blocks rolling it across the rooftop. Maybe the roof isn't strong enough for that. So be aware of that. Now, how we could have prevented this roof a little bit better, we could have installed, some tougher, skid pads on the roof for the kind of main alleyway down the roof as we were walking. And maybe that's something the project developer and the designer and the contractor all have to work together on. But we did not work together on it in that case, to everybody's detriment. Being gentle while brooming the roof. So these are like big giant squeegees that you're just pushing water towards a drain. Not being too rough with those brooms to not scrape into the roofing edge. In our case, the roof had already begun to flake apart, and it was kind of happening all over the place in the day or two before we had this massive roof leak. It's like you leave site the day before and there's one little, spot on the roof that's come up. And it's like, okay, well, we'll look for more spots tomorrow. Don't ignore holes in the roof or a roof surface that's kind of looking like it's being damaged while you're installing on it. So be gentle, consider temporary or permanent walkways. All of the above is the right answer on this one. Hey Tay, good. We're reviewing the quiz from Friday, and then we're going to go through the NABCEP exam right after this. So how might you prevent, let me do a sound check to make sure everything's just going smooth, looking right. So how might you prevent damage to lawns from heavy equipment? Make plywood tracks. Oof. We had a picture in class, and this involved us going to the local hardware store, and we had a saw already on site, and we bought some plywood for our heavy equipment wheels to drive over. And what that allowed us to do is to drive on this little lawn area with our equipment without cratering their lawn. You can't drive on all heavy equipment on all grass. You don't want to. You don't want to drive over something that like a shallow irrigation or plumbing system. But when you are doing it, putting down plywood tracks is a great way to distribute that load of that equipment over a larger area. So you could rent a crane. It's not that you never drive machinery on grass. There's outdoor equipment. So that, again, Just a little construction technique, not something that's going to be on the NABCEP exam. So what's an important thing about making an Ethernet connector? So this is where you're installing a lot of inverters, and the way they communicate with each other is Ethernet connections. And so you might actually find yourself making custom Ethernet connections in the field, and even the solar installers don't have much experience doing this stuff. The least important thing about making an Ethernet connector, well, the color code has to be correct. If the color code is not correct, then it doesn't work. So that's very important. Using outdoor rated Ethernet cable for outdoor installations, that's important too. So the Ethernet cable that you just go into the hardware store and buy is indoor use. At your electrical supply shop, you can get a shielded kind of direct burial Ethernet cable, a little more robust and weatherproof. Using a connector that allows you to insert the wires through a window in the connector and then trim it. That's very useful. I love that kind of connector. I think it's a lot easier than there's one connector where you kind of stick the wires all the way through and then your tool cuts off the loose slack. And then there's another tool where you have to cut the wires straight and then shove them into the connector and butt them up against, where the window would be. Instead, there's a wall. But no matter which connector you're using, straightening the wires before inserting them into the connector. There's like 8 of them, and I grab all 8 between my 2 fingers and kind of slightly, clamp them down between my hands and thumbs and kind of wiggle them a little bit, flatten them out and wiggle them a little bit with your hands, and it straightens them up. And that is the way you put the wires into any Ethernet connector, regardless of what it is. So the least important thing, this is kind of a trick question. It's a little difficult to read through, and you're never going to see an Ethernet question on the NABCEP exam, even though maybe you should. But this was just to reinforce some Ethernet knowledge. The correct answer is this one, using one connector style over another. So that's just about knowledge reinforcement. Don't feel bad about not getting that one correct if you were in that 50% who did not. Where can you find the dimensional instructions on how to locate commercial chalk lines? So there's single line diagrams, array layout map, the manufacturer installation manual, or all of the above. The answer is not all of the above. So it's not always all of the above as a solution. Single line diagrams are the simplified electrical drawing. And so single line diagrams are really just electrical. They don't tell you where the chalk lines are. In fact, the array layout map, it sounds like that's correct. The array layout shows you how many rows of modules there are and where the panels are going to be, and often we'll have these concrete block diagrams that we looked at on Friday that will tell you exactly how many concrete blocks are going where. But they don't tell you things like, this is where the chalk line's going to go here, then that's where the chalk line's going to go there. I mean, it's a surprising lack of construction detail is in the actual array layout. So in order to figure out exactly how you're supposed to be chalk lining and the dimensions between modules and rail for chalk lining, that's found in the manufacturer specific installation manual. Again, something that if you're a foreman on the job or a crew leader on the job, if you can find out what racking you are using on your project ahead of the project, going into the manufacturer installation manual and following their formula for calculating where your chalk line should go for snapping out a commercial rooftop. That's preparation you do ahead of the project, um, to save you time when you're actually on site. So it's the correct answer is the manufacturer installation manual. Look, no one got that right. That is where you find the dimensional drawings. What is a good resource if you are looking for jobs in your area and you are getting to the point of desperation and you don't know where to go to find jobs? NABCEP has a directory on their website of all the PV installers in your area, and it also has a contact form. And the installers are broken out not just by state but also by city. And so this is not something that you would ever want to abuse, but if you are trying to get into solar in your area, finding out who the local installers are in your area, and I don't know, maybe going to their website and filling out a job application that way is a great way to do it. But if that's not successful, don't, if you're not getting in touch with anyone at that company, another way to kind of crash your way through the door is to send a polite but short email through the NABCEP contact form saying, who you are, what tools or construction experience you have, that you've been through some solar training and you want to do some solar projects. That's a good way you can just directly reach out to someone who's already working in solar in your area, and that job opportunity or that connection is not going to happen if you don't make that contact. So maybe it's awkward or intimidating to reach out to a stranger and say, hey, can you help me out with some work opportunity? But it happens pretty frequently in the solar industry. So nabcep.org, their directory, something worth checking out. By the way, we created Facebook groups and LinkedIn groups. If you want to join them, you can. Just send a message in the Discord channel. I recommend joining LinkedIn, and you may not be on LinkedIn. And I don't think that the social networking stuff is really as important as people may. I think people spend too much time on social networking. But if you join, I think LinkedIn is a good one to be on. And if you want to kind of expand your LinkedIn network a little bit, join our LinkedIn group, and that will help you, I don't know, have a little bit going on in LinkedIn, because a lot of hiring decision makers are on LinkedIn. Why should you leave your cell phone in the car? You don't know how your supervisor or crew leader or foreman feels about workers on their phones. A cell phone can be very useful on a job site. There's apps where you can use your phone to find the tilt angle of the rooftop, and you can use it to check weather and maybe read some diagrams and all that. So yes, a cell phone's useful on a job, but it can also get you in trouble, especially if you're not the boss. If you're the worker, then don't just copy what all your other coworkers are doing, because you don't even know if, just because a couple of people are on their phones, you don't really know if your crew leader or foreman is all right with that. And even if they tolerate it, they might also be judging it secretly in the back of their head, and you don't want to be the low guy on the totem pole. So, leaving your phone in your car will keep you out of career trouble. The other thing is it is super, super easy to break your phone on a solar job site. You put your phone in your pocket, you got all these hammers and heavy tools flying in and out, and you're climbing, you're moving around, you're brushing up against hard objects. So you will break your phone one way or another, whether you're laying down on the rooftop to better position some solar panels and you crunch your phone against the edge of the roof, or whatever. You'll break your phone, or you'll leave it on the roof and then have to go back after work to get your phone off the roof, or leave it there and it gets rained on. I mean, there's so many different ways you can break or lose your phone on a rooftop, in addition to it looking unprofessional. So, all of the above is the answer to that one. And good. Option one. Yeah, I guess that's a bonus question. Okay, so for everyone who's still just tuning in, we are on the live stream, and we are about to review the PV Associate practice exam, and talk about some concepts that might not have been in class. And there's some questions on this exam that I didn't like the wording of, or even there was a question I didn't agree with the actual answer. So there are going to be questions on this exam that you just don't know the answer to. That's why it's important to know the answers to all the other questions. I think you need to get like a 65% to pass this thing. So let's see. So where's my nice I don't want that. I want the pie charts. I don't know why it changed up like that, but that will not intimidate us. Okay. So let's start going through it. So there's there's about 35 questions on the PV Associate exam. I think you have 2 hours to get through it. That should be plenty of time. I always use almost all of my time on these exams. Even if you don't feel like you have to use all the time on the exam, why not? I mean, what else are you going to do in that 2 hours? And if you are nervous about whether or not you're going to pass this exam, and most likely you will be, you want to make sure you give yourself the best shot at doing it. So when it comes time for you to actually take this exam, come back into the Discord and take another practice exam or two. I think the absolute best way to study for these exams are to take practice exams and go through the Q&A for it. So even just reviewing this exam is going to be useful to you. Okay, so for which of the PV systems can dissimilar PV module types be used with little or no system loss. So one is a system with reflectors that enhance the available irradiance. So those are like mirrors that bounce sunlight off. That's not common. And this is a bad question too, because it's like there's no solar array out there where they're using different kinds of solar modules. That's rare, unusual. Doesn't I've never. I mean, I maybe one or two, but it's always some do-it-yourselfers, thing. But they have to think of these questions that test your knowledge, and sometimes these questions are not reflective of anything that you'll actually see in the field. But we have to reason through it. So we have a system with reflectors. That's weird. That's not the answer. A system that uses a common DC to DC converter just before the central inverter. So that is similar to something that does what this says it should do, but the key here is it says a common converter. So this electricity does not allow for much independence if everything is tied into the same spot. And once everything gets tied into the same spot, it kind of has to be in lockstep with each other. And so using dissimilar solar panels all kind of tied together, unmanaged at a common point is not going to work out. And so if they only have one electrical device, whatever this DC to DC converter does, it's only one thing for the entire system. And so the entire system would have to be uniform for that to work. The next one, a system, no one answered this for thin film, and that's an even weirder one. That's not the right answer. So, a system that uses an AC PV modules that are coupled only to the AC system. Okay, so this is actually a pretty tough question, because when they're talking about AC PV modules that are coupled only to the AC system, what they're talking about are microinverters. And the weird thing about microinverters is they do a full DC to AC up on the rooftop for every single solar panel. And what they've done to make this question hard, to make it a tricky question, is they've called them AC solar modules, whereas anyone in the solar industry would say solar panels with microinverters attached. But the key here is they're saying that they're like using, and I don't know, one of the key words is that the solar modules are independent of each other, as you would get in AC wiring, which is parallel wiring. So this is a tough question. Only 38% of the class got it right, but we know it's not going to be reflecting the sun. We know it's thin film is a weird thing, and this has a common point. So the best, if you recognize that AC solar panels are microinverters, and you know that microinverters work independently of each other, that is how you would get that question right. So we need to know a little bit more about microinverters. Which of the following is not a factor when calculating the economic payback of a PV system? So this is another question where you're going to have to kind of rely on some logic to do it. The system purchase price is a factor of economic payback. So how much the system costs is part of the economics. Permitting and inspection fees adds on to system costs. The value of the electricity adds on to system cost. This is a bad question. You know, I'll be the first to say it. You know, how much the solar installer's insurance costs the solar installer, you know, that has a trickle down effect where it means the installer has to buy insurance, so the installer has to charge so much for the job, and so the job costs so much. But that's a lot more indirect than all these other figures. So, you know, half the class got this question right. The solar installer's insurance is what impacts the economic payback of the system, I suppose the least. You know, maybe it could be a factor, but it's a much smaller factor than the price of the system, the costs of permitting inspection, and the potentially the buyback rate that the utility spends for on the electricity. So this question we didn't cover in class. We didn't talk too much about batteries in class. And what this question is asking is, you know, which batteries need ventilation? And there's a couple of different kinds of batteries. There's sealed batteries, and then there's unsealed batteries. And it's really weird. The unsealed batteries will produce gas, and most of that gas is water. And so you'll need to add water back to the batteries periodically. You know, sealed batteries capture that water vapor in them, and so you don't need to water them. In fact, you can't, because they're all sealed up. And there's pros and cons of both. You know, generally speaking, an unsealed battery is going to perform better than a sealed battery, except you have to do some maintenance. You have to add some water, and you have to worry about the gas that it produces. So, you know, lithium ion batteries, you know, the batteries that might be in like a vape pen or your electrical tools, they don't emit gas. You don't put water in them. Those are sealed up batteries. Those are sealed batteries. In fact, you know, Duracell non-lithium ion batteries could be lead acid batteries, but they're sealed as well. So any kind of battery, whether it be lead acid or lithium ion, that you can, you know, tip over on its side, that you don't have to put water into, a regular battery is a sealed battery. You know, this is also a bad question. You know, it's hard to make a great solar question and have it be unclear, but you know, what they're implying by this question is that a flooded lead acid battery is one that you add water to. And that's not perfect either, because there are some flooded lead acid batteries that are sealed. At any rate, the answer is a flooded lead acid battery. You know, I did not make this practice exam. This is the practice exam that is, or it's very similar to the official practice exam. So, you know, this is the kind of questions, these are similar to what you're going to get on the exam, and you have to kind of reason out what the question is asking and saying, it's saying what batteries require ventilation, and lithium ion does not. It's a sealed battery. AGM is a type of flooded lead acid battery that is sealed, and not all, you know, a flow battery, it's an experimental battery. It's like a fuel cell. It's a sealed battery. But even if you didn't know what a flow battery was, you know, it's listing flooded lead acid here because that's a common kind of unsealed battery, like a forklift battery. How you doing?
Hi. Just want to see how everybody was doing.
Yeah. So the next one we did pretty good on. Which of the following has a limited role in PV system maintenance? So data monitoring is important to see how the system is doing. These microinverter systems or DC optimizer systems, you can see what every panel's doing. Module operating characteristics. Hey, whoever answered that, I'm with you. I think that the module operating characteristics don't have much to do with PV maintenance, except that if something was to go wrong, you might start by comparing how the module's supposed to operate against with how it's actually operating. You know, if you get out there and the solar panel is producing exactly 2/3 of what it should be, and you have 3 circuits, you know, something's probably wrong with one of the 3 circuits. So you're actually using the spec sheet information to kind of diagnose problems. The warranty obviously will play a role in system maintenance. So they're saying the installation cost has a limited role in system maintenance. Is that true? You know, the higher the cost the install, usually the better the system is and the longer it'll go without maintenance. But you could just have a high-priced installer installing a standard job, and you know, and no system's perfect either. But they're trying to get to the installation cost for it being not involved with the system maintenance. Uh-oh. All right. Okay, the next question. Which of the following is designed to offset some of the customer's power and provide emergency power in case of a power outage? So this is where you have to read the systems and kind of guess. They have a standalone system, a utility interactive system. So we know it's going to be utility interactive, but it also has this extra backup power capability. So let's talk about this. A power supply system, a UPS system, is actually one way. It goes from it's like a battery that sits on the floor, and it goes from the power lines in the wall to charge the battery, and then the devices draw its load off the battery. A UPS system never backfeeds the grid. So a uninterrupted power supply system or a UPS system, not only is that a weird kind of odd answer, but it's also technically incorrect because it's just one way. The power goes out, it protects your computers from losing power for a little bit of time, but it doesn't backfeed the grid. A standalone system doesn't really sound like something that would be utility interactive. That might be an off-grid system. A standalone system might also be a system that only has solar panels and not batteries. You know, I'm not trying to tell you what a standalone system is right now. I'm telling you what it could be. Could be without batteries, could be without the grid. You know, it doesn't make sense to what the question's asking. So really we have to determine, is it going to be a utility interactive system or a utility interactive system with battery backup? And because it provides emergency power, it has battery backup. Solar panels, by and large, will not produce power during a grid outage unless they have batteries. And it's a lot more complicated than that in reality. But fundamentally, you know, if the solar array is dumb and it just takes all of its electricity that it can and dumps it into as much as it can into your home or back into the grid. And they have to turn off when the grid's down so that people can repair the power lines. So there's all sorts of things you can do to prevent that from happening, but fundamentally you need batteries. So it's the utility interactive system with battery backup. Okay. Which of the following factors is the most overlooked when analyzing the life cycle cost? Okay, so this, I thought that this was yet another terrible question on the practice exam, because it's saying what is most often overlooked when analyzing life cycle costs of the PV system. And it's not the installation cost. Everyone looks at the install cost. Um, I would put maintenance cost, which is what everyone else put too. If you're not factoring in maintenance costs, then that's part of the total life cycle cost. So I think that is a good answer. The salvage value of the PV system is what you can get for it at the end of its life. And, there's a market out there for used solar panels. The price between a used solar panel and a new solar panel is pretty close together. So often people find really what they think are really good deals on used solar panels, and in fact they're not the best deals if you're in the industry and you have your ear to the ground. Used solar panels are often overvalued by the customer. You almost always are going to want to pay for a used solar panel something like one third of what the homeowner or the seller actually thinks they're worth. But the salvage value is factored into life cycle costs as well. The real answer to this question, the one that NABCEP would say is the correct answer, is the interest rates on the loans. And I think they are right in saying this is an important enough issue to know about, but I don't think this is the right way to ask the question. But the fact is, when you take a loan out on a car, you go get a car loan, by the time you get to the end of the car loan, you've paid twice as much over that 7-year period as what the car was worth. The loan on a car loan doubles the cost of the car. A house is the same way. When you go take a mortgage out on a house, it's a 30-year loan, and you end up paying about twice as much for the house because of the interest rates on your home. It's a lower rate than a car loan, but it's for 30 years instead of 7. And so a car loan, the auto loan, the interest rate's really high, and over 7 years you end up doubling the cost. For a home, the interest rate's really low, and over 30 years you end up doubling the cost. What a lot of solar owners make the mistake of hearing a really long-term payback for solar, and then they say, okay, well, oh shoot, I'm fading down. Oh no.